And finally, end users. Who are the end users? Of course, as I was telling you, biofuels is transport fuels. You need biofuels to run cars, trucks and buses. So ideally, the majority of end users of biofuels are individual owners of private vehicles. But in some countries, government agencies, I was telling you in 5 minutes about government support this industry, but in some countries, notably the United States, government agencies, military forces, municipal governments, and cities purchase biodiesel for the fleet of buses and vehicles, which means it is a way of government agencies that can support this industry. What can we say about production costs? So we have been discussing the structure of this industry, 4 parts: production of feedstocks, biofuel manufacturing, wholesale retail distribution, and users. We now have to say something about costs. The costs of producing biofuels vary significantly from one country to another. I'll just show you some figures in the next slide, depending on the feedstock process, costs of energy and labour and location, which means that when we talk about the biofuel industry, we're really talking about many different realities. Why is location important? Location is important because it determines access to particular feedstocks and energy supplies, the prices of which are to a large degree driven by market developments at the global scale. Location is really important, but basic processes come to use are not so different, do not vary greatly from one country to the other, though the scale of the actual plants actually does. It is a recent study, the one I was mentioning at the start, the one with that stimulating title, is the cure was the disease, finds that the expansion of biofuels derived from starch, sugars and plant oils alone, what we call first generation biofuels, because in a second I will be telling you about second generation biofuels. The first generation biofuels alone will hit the limit within the next decade, which means any further increase in supplies beyond that limit will have to come from second generation technology, which use cellulosic materials and are thought to be less environmentally damaging than first generation biofuels. Production costs, quickly to the picture. As you can see, probably you cannot really see it, on the left-hand side of the graph, you find a pre-tax petrol or gasoline, as American English is the word for petrol. The pre-tax gasoline prices is there, and on the right-hand side of the picture, you see different sorts of costs. The ethanol from sugarcane is certainly, the one which is produced in Brazil, is certainly the most cost competitive. It's the cheapest one, which at present is already, and with prices, of course, pre-tax gasoline prices are probably much higher now than they were when that picture was drew. But ethanol from sugarcane produced in Brazil is currently already not competitive. So it can be an effective substitute in terms of prices and costs for petrol. The other biofuels, ethanol from maize, which is essentially produced in the United States and Canada, is more expensive, even if the International Energy Agency predicts that in 30 years from now that cost will fall. And all the other biodiesel, all the other biofuels, ethanol from sugar beet, which is the ethanol produced in Europe, ethanol from wheat, and lignocellulosic ethanol are all more expensive. So for the time being, what this picture tells us is 2 things. First of all, as I was mentioning before, when we talk about biofuels, we talk about an industry, a complex industry where many different realities exist. The second thing the second idea that picture aims at conveying is that for the time being, only ethanol produced from sugarcane, this is the Brazilian ethanol, is cost competitive, can be but that all the other biofuels are for the time being probably still very expensive to produce, which of course justifies the need for government support, provided the governments think that these biofuels ought to be supported. Basically the same kind, I won't spend too much time on that. Basically, you can find a presentation uploaded on the website of the conference. So if you're interested in data and the sources these data come from, basically the same comments can be made about the costs of biodiesel. Government support. Now this is a very complicated picture which shows that government support biofuels at all stages of production. It's very tiny script, prevents you from reading it, but the biofuel industry receives subsidies, government subsidies at all stages. From crop and irrigation subsidies, which of course has to do with the first stage, with production of feedstocks, on to subsidies to intermediate inputs and value-adding factors, and then on and on. The most important one, subsidies to production of biofuels through payments and tax credits. But going on to subsidies to storage, so wholesale and retail distribution, subsidies to purchase of biofuels, they will move to the demand side of the market.